What's up there, it's your boy the HOD of the PSP and welcome back to the Pitchside Podcast channel. Like, share, comment on the YouTube version, subscribe to the channel, enable notifications to receive the updates, help us on the way to our first K in this channel. Follow us on social media, Side PSP here on Twitter, Pitchside Pod on Instagram, and you can listen of course on Spotify, Google Podcasts or any other platform alongside the main podcast on this channel. Welcome to another episode of CAF Champions League Road episode 5 and you're It's round 3 in the African biggest competition really, and we're getting into the heat of things as the group stages is getting deeper and deeper. And as we're getting deeper into this group stage, of course, it looks like certainly things are being more interesting in across all the groups. And I'm going to, of course, as usual, start chronologically from Group A. Group A, of course, 2 matches are played on the same day on, going to be played on Saturday, with Al-Merrikh facing Simba SC and Al-Ahly facing Vita Club. Let's start from Al-Merrikh, of course, after 2 back-to-back losses, with the second one against Vita Club being more sort of disheartening to the Sudanese side than the first one against Al-Ahly, which was sort of expected against the champions of the competition. But the second one against Vita Club, with the sort of the comeback that the Congolese side made in that game, made it really, really interesting for everyone to watch. The Sudanese side, they weren't favourites by any chance of the imagination to top this group, but at least you expect them to have enough in them to go second, behind Al-Ahly at least, and both sides are really have nothing going for them at the moment, at least after the second round of matches. The Hilal, of course, or Al-Merrikh, sorry, with the 4-4-2, we don't expect a lot of changes against a side in Simba that just really, likes to be pretty straightforward in their formation. Also a 4-4-2 for them, just like they played against Al-Ahly, but the difference is, I think the way they played against Al-Ahly was pretty simple, pretty basic, but also pretty effective from Simba. They played to their strength, they know what to do, and they know how to get the games done. Of course, the victory against Al-Ahly was pretty well deserved over the course of the game, in particular the first half. So they entered this game with no Tadu Luonga, of course, he's injured, he's going to be missing the game. For Simba, for Al-Merrikh, they have a fully fit squad, but also you have to question their performances. As of late, they're not exactly hitting on all cylinders. The Sudanese side, as far as the league is concerned, in fact, for Al-Merrikh, they're not exactly doing well. The latest result in the league was the game against Hilal Kadugli, a goalless draw in the Sudanese Premier League, which at the moment, of course, they're not doing well, as I mentioned. In the second match of that group, Al-Ahly hosts Vita Club, and I think this should be straightforward. Despite the fact that it looks hard and it sounds hard after the defeat against Simba, a defeat in which Al-Ahly showed little to nothing in terms of actual chances, but this should be a much, not easier, but I think a much straightforward game, I would say, for Al-Ahly if they play the normal way they do, and they would have a lot of opportunities to score goals, unlike the game against Simba, where they seemed out of sorts, out of resources. The game didn't help them really. The setup from Simba was pretty well positioned. The side from Tanzania were well positioned to defend well and to break well and to find spaces even behind the defenders from Al-Ahly, who weren't really at their best in that game. This should be easier for the defending champions. Things are not looking good necessarily in the group. Yes, they are not top of it, as I certainly and a lot of people expected. They are your joint second or third, if you want to look at it from that perspective, behind Vita Club, behind their opponents, and any point for Vita Club in that game is going to be crucial, considering that Simba have the potential to beat the Sudanese side in Al-Merrikh in the second game and in the other game of that group. Of course, Simba top in the group with 6 points. 2 goals, no goals conceded. The simplistic of simplistic victories yet. There are, profiting from a couple of sides in Vita Club and Al-Merrikh who couldn't break them down exactly in both games. Of course, Simba will face Al-Merrikh home and away, and they start with the travel to Sudan before hosting them in the next round at Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. It's going to be 10 days later, of course, in the 16th of March. It's going to be interesting to see how they will do in that one. For Al-Ahly and Vita Club, again, it's going to be straightforward. It should be it should be easier for Al-Ahly to deal with this game than the previous one against Simba, of course. No crowds, no that pressure that all of a sudden was affecting them against Simba. I mean, you should expect better from the champions. Their performances in the last couple of games, also in the Egyptian league as well, is not exactly filling the fans with joy. But again, Al-Ahly, by name, by nature, they should be winning those kind of games. They should be beating their opponents quite easily. In the Champions League, they should have been top in this group, but a bit of a slow start as usual in the group stages for the last couple of years for them. They only pick steam in the knockout rounds. If they get there, I mean, it's a hard possibility that they won't make it, but, football has nothing impossible in it pretty much. So 6 points for Simba, Vita Club with 3 points, as well as Al-Ahly and Al-Merrikh with no points in the bottom of that. Moving on, and to Group B, of course, certainly one of the, let's say, more tighter groups in that competition, or at least on paper, it looked like a tight one, but Mamelodi Sundowns seemed to be breaking away from the rest of the pack. A 5-1 victory against CR Wydad. Last time out, of course, in a game that was rescheduled from the first round. A 5-1 victory in Tanzania in a neutral venue. As I mentioned, it didn't give exactly the biggest of advantages to CR Wydad in that game. They were thrashed 5-1. Sundowns breaking on the counter. They're so dangerous. They're so pacey. And, it looks like mostly they're going to be top in that group, so it's all about who's going to be in second place behind them. Back to Wydad, though. This is, I think, the first game where you look at this and say they have a chance, right? They have a chance to, get 3 points. They had a point against Mazembe, which was cool, but then the thrashing from Sundowns is not going to help them, not just in terms of the results and the overall points, but maybe even when it comes down to the goal difference, which is going to be, one of the sort of factors in breaking a tie if it happens. But obviously the head-to-head competition is the first factor. It might not help if they concede 5 goals against Sundowns, and if conceding more goals isn't going to be the motor. I mean, the draw against Mazembe filled the fans with happiness. I think the CR Wydad supporters probably thought we could get something out of this group, and they could still do it. We're only in second round. You don't know what the next 4 matches is going to bring in. But if they want to do that, they need to start from this game against Al Hilal. They need to get the 3 points and start working on that. Of course, their form is not exactly great in the Algerian league. CR Wydad, I mean, they still have games in hand, as we discussed a lot on this podcast. They have a lot of games in hand, so they're not exactly 100% played their fixtures in the league. They have quite the number of games to be played. Al Hilal Omdurman on the other side, I mean, on such a bad form as well in the league. I mean, they have one win in the last 4 competitions overall. They played Mazembe before the competition. Of course, it was a friendly against them. They lost to Simba, another part of this Champions League. So, I mean, their form hasn't been exactly balanced. The loss against Mamelodi Sundowns was pretty also expected, considering the circumstances of the game. They went for it, they exposed themselves, they left themselves high, and against a side like Sundowns, you don't expose yourself, and you don't leave yourself handing high. Against Mazembe, probably they deserved a little bit more than what they had in that game, considering that they had the opportunities, they had the possession, they had the chance. Mazembe with 10 men playing at the end of the game, they should have had a little bit more than what they did in that game. They only finished with a point there, and probably that's something they could regret by the end of the group stages. Speaking of TP Mazembe, they host Mamelodi Sundowns, and that's going to be an interesting one as well. They met before, and they met 3 times. Mamelodi Sundowns won twice, and TP Mazembe won 1. So it's the 4th meeting between the two sides. Contrasted form in the Champions League. I personally thought that TP Mazembe were going to be top in the group, but they looked pretty slow and laborious in the 2 games that they played so far. 2 goalless draws, home and away. with the home advantage, I think, being taken away with the fact that there's no crowd, you don't expect Mazembe to be as strong or as intimidating of an entity as they usually do in their stadium, with its tight sort of nature, and how close the seats are or the stands are from the actual pitch. For Mamelodi Sundowns, I think they're flying high in this group. It looks like they're going to be topping it. No real discussion about that. If they get this point, I mean, if they get a victory against Mazembe and they get to 9 points, it's going to be impossible not to see them top this group quite comfortably and quite easily as well, because they have Mazembe at home next, and then they're going to be having, of course, to move to travel to Durman to face Al-Hilal, and then, of course, they're going to be facing Wydad at home. So that is going to be an interesting situation all around for Mamelodi Sundowns, who, again, one of the favourites to win the Champions League. They could manage something against Mazembe, and hopefully from a North African Arab point of view, CR Wydad could get the 3 points, so they could challenge for that second spot and maybe do something significant in that group. From a group that looks pretty tight on paper to a group that looks, also set in stone, I think it's Wydad and Horoya. The first couple of fixtures in this group sort of shaped the way this group is going to be looking. Wydad with 6 points, flying super high, 4-0 victory against Kaizer Chiefs in the rescheduled game of that group. It was played in Tanzania as well. Horoya Conakry, of course, with a draw against Petro Atletico in the last time out. It is going to be interesting against Kaizer Chiefs in the second round. Wydad, of course, defeating Petro de Luanda 4-0. The victory against Kaizer Chiefs is going to be interesting to see if those two bottom teams, could one of them flip the chain somehow? Could one of them have a good result in the end? But it looks, again, set in stone. There's not a lot to talk about in this group. Wydad Casablanca just flying high, so strong above the rest. Horoya Conakry might get the second place eventually. Kaizer Chiefs and Petro de Luanda look pretty hopeless and desperate in their quest. Maybe Kaizer Chiefs more than the others, because certainly the loss against Wydad Casablanca 4-0, and after a draw against Horoya 0-0, it doesn't really bode well for them. And Petro Luanda, despite the fact that they held Wydad to quite a hard victory in the first one, they couldn't quite manage themselves against Horoya. They completely collapsed against them in a 2-0 victory, and they're going to be facing each other, of course, face to face, Kaizer Chiefs and Petro de Luanda, maybe for who's going to be the closest to get the second spot behind Wydad. Speaking of Wydad, they're going to be facing, of course, against Horoya Conakry in the third round. They're going to be hosting them at in their stadium in Morocco. Of course, there's no real restrictions on that, and it's straightforward. Wydad should be winning this one quite comfortably. This should be easy picking for them, and I know that Horoya are an interesting side. They're quite intriguing away from home, at least when you play them in Guinea. At least in Conakry, they're going to be interesting and hard to play for, but I don't think going to Morocco that is going to be any harder for the side from Casablanca. There should be 3 points easy for Wydad. They looked really great in their 4-0 demolition of Kaizer Chiefs last time out. And, you don't expect them to drop points in this group. You just don't expect them to lose those kind of games. 5 goals, 0 goals conceded, strong on both ends of the game. If anything, out of all the big guns in this competition, I would say Wydad looked the best out of all of those, alongside Mamelodi Sundowns. They looked the most convincing, really. Simba, surprising in Group A as minnows, but I think Wydad, in terms of the big guns, the favourites to win that competition, looked the best out of the 4 groups, which, going to be interesting to see how this is going to be all panning out in the rest of the competition. As far as this group is concerned, 6 points for Wydad, 4 for Horoya, 1 for Kaizer Chiefs, and 0 points for Petro de Luanda. Of course, Wydad and Horoya are going to be meeting both home and away. These reverse fixtures are so important, because the more points you pick in them, the more advantage you have over the team you're facing and over the rest of the group as well. And into Group D, the most interesting group really in this competition, and of course all eyes, I think, from all groups really, from all the games you could look forward to, this is the group where has the biggest game to look forward to. It's Esperance de Tunis facing against Zamalek, and it's all about redemption for the Tunisian side, the champions from 2018 and 19, facing the runners-up from 2020. A game that, full of stories. I think Esperance would want redemption from the Super Cup last year, from the quarter-final of the Champions League last year. Really, the fact that Zamalek got them out of both competitions, defeated them for the Super Cup, and also ousted them in the quarter-final of the Champions League last season, it's gonna be, it's gonna make this game already intense. Add to that the fact that Esperance Tunis seem pretty relaxed in the Tunisian league, 37 points on top, 10 points ahead of their closest rivals, and overall, it should be really interesting to see how Zamalek are going to be dealing with this, how Esperance are going to be dealing with this. Is there a psychological factor in this game that's going to be affecting Esperance? Because a team that gets you out of the Super Cup, a team that gets you out of the quarterfinals of the Champions League last season, has to live rent-free in your head, right? Specifically if they demolish you 3-1 in back-to-back games last season. The 3-1 victories, double victories for Zamalek in the Super Cup, and then the first leg of the Champions League quarter-final. Then the second leg of that competition in the quarter-final, Esperance had a 1-0 victory that could have been more. There's certain details that I don't want to get into in that game, refereeing details and what have you, so I'm not gonna be distressing you with those kind of thoughts, but this is all about redemption. You face them home and away, and those fixtures are important. And if Esperance Tunis want to win that group, if they want to go ahead and be top of that group, they need to defeat Zamalek in Tunisia before going to Egypt and needing to manage the game there and get the best result that they can. And that best result is, a win, really. Because, the draw wouldn't be bad and wouldn't be considered a disaster, but obviously against a side that cost you both competition last season, you want to get some revenge. And at least in Tunisia, Esperance need the 3 points completely off Zamalek, who are a side that would really poised to top the group, despite the fact that Esperance ended the competition as head of that group. Zamalek, of course, missing 3 key players in Chikabala, it has Imam and Abdeshafi in the left backs. They have good replacement, but certainly not going to be the same when they lose these kind of players, specifically the fullbacks Imam and Abdeshafi on the right wing and the left wing. They are great fullbacks, they support a lot, and losing them might be quite the blow, but we never know how Zamalek are going to be setting themselves up. They always tight, but they looked pretty slow in the first couple of games, so that might be a positive sign that if you just beat them with a little bit of pace and trickery, which Esperance I think have in their locker superbly, and you could get the 3 points easily. But it will need a lot of work, it will need a lot of concentration, it will need pretty good tactical setup, choosing the right personnel, the right tactic, the right way to manage the game, not enter the game completely, firing all cylinders since the first 20 minutes, maybe exhaust yourself and leave yourself open and exposed for potential counter-attack play later down the line in the game, because Zamalek are all about absorbing the pressure when they are under pressure. We saw that in the semi-final against Raja Casablanca last season in the Champions League. They absorbed their pressure, both home and away legs, and deservedly got through because they were tighter, they were better defensively, and they picked their moments quite expertly, and also playing the right tactics and choosing the right personnel. That's what should be done for Esperance in that game, and against a side like Zamalek, you cannot really easily break them down, so you need to play the right way. You need to be a little bit patient, a little bit more patient than usual in this game, because again, they are tight defensively, their midfield combination of Tariq Hamid and Ferjani Sassi is quite superb, and they have really speedy wingers if they want to play on the counter in Ben Sharqi and Zizou and Yusuf Obama. Those kind of players could interlink and could interplay and could do really, really well and cause a lot of danger. And the fullbacks of Esperance are not exactly the best. They leave spaces behind them, specifically on the left. It's like the Robertson case in Liverpool, where they leave spaces behind them when they go forward, and the wingers of the opponents could get through, so that shouldn't be happening if Esperance want to win. The second game in this group, Tungit versus MC Alger, a game between a favourite to go through, MC Alger, really a good side. They showed good signs against Zamalek, they showed good signs against Esperance, but to be fair, in the second game in particular, they should have lost, really, with the chances that Esperance had in the second half. Tunguith showed, I think, enough of resilience in both games to suggest that they could get something out of this, and of course they host them in Senegal before facing them in Algeria on the 16th of March. They are a side that defends really well. When they find opportunities, when they find space, they play really, really quickly, and they move quite well. They're not exactly the rigid sides of the Central African region that you expect sometimes to be physical. They're not that way. They're just a little bit smarter, and they move a little bit quicker, and they move a little bit with intent down those channels. So it could be interesting for MC Alger. The group, of course, as it stands, Esperance with 6 points, or 4 points at the top, 2 points for MC Algiers and Zamalek on second, and Tunguith with 1 point. The group, I think it's still pretty interesting, and after this round, it's either could get a little bit tighter, or the shape of it, or the two teams that are going to be going through with it, could be a little bit clearer. And that's it from me for this episode. I was your boy, the HD of the PSP. Thanks for joining, listening, watching. Subscribe to the channel, like, share, comment on the video, enable notifications to receive the updates, and help us reach 1k. Pitchside Pod on Instagram, follow me there. Sign PSP on Twitter, and you can listen as well alongside the other episodes of the podcast on Spotify and Google Podcast or any other platform. That's it from me. I was your boy, the HD of the PSP, and I'll see you after the game between Chelsea and Liverpool. Goodbye.